Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome to our channel, and thanks for logging on. Today we're discussing the Rolex Oyster Perpetual Cosmograph Daytona reference 16520. You can see this Zenith-powered stainless steel late 1990s Rolex Daytona and purchase it on our website. Subscribe to our YouTube channel if you enjoy these videos, and please click on the card in the upper right hand corner of the screen at any time during this video to see our full sales listing for this watch with additional accessories included in the sale, high resolution images for your desktop, and naturally complete pricing details for this Rolex 16520 Cosmograph Daytona. For many, this is the watch. This is the generation 1988 to 1999 that turned the Daytona from an also ran and an afterthought in Rolex dealer cases to possibly the hottest watch consistently year to year for the Rolex sports watch family, including the Submariner. So this was a transformational era for Zenith, and during the 90s it was well known that the one everyone wanted, the one so often waitlisted, the one that you would literally buy and then sell at a markup pre-owned, was the stainless steel model. There have been a couple of different dial combinations. Bracelet, bezel even have changed over time, and from 88 to 99 there were quite a few transformations. I want to clarify that the model you're looking at here is the type that is often associated with the term Patrizzi dial. This is not that, however, and I'll explain that later. First, let's talk about the fit. Now, it's 40 millimeters across the round of the case. The fit and the feel of the Daytona have been almost exactly the same since 1988, and for that matter, so have the aesthetics of the watch. Now, 40 millimeters is the distance across the round of the case from 9 to 3, not including crown guards or pushers. It is a slim watch. 12.2 millimeters thick with a generously sloped conical bezel. It'll slide underneath any dress cuff. Now, here's where you're going to notice one of the few changes from the earlier examples. This is a solid end link bracelet. This is the 78390A, and as you can see, it has contemporary style solid end links. So I'm going to give you two measurements. One is the lug-to-lug, so case only. If you were to throw this on a strap, it would be 46.8 millimeters across the wrist. Counting the solid end links on both sides, it's a more robust and contemporary 50.2 millimeters across the wrist. The bracelet's in outstanding shape, as is the watch. It does change the stance having the later solid end link bracelet, and to a degree it does change the feel and the fit a little bit. The watch feels just a bit larger, just a little bit more imposing to the eye. The rest of the bracelet is quite comfortable, and as you can see, this one's in good condition. The watch, minimally if ever refinished, has all of the calling cards of a well-loved and lightly used timepiece. As you can see, the lugs are beautiful and full, the width on both sides nice and even, the finish, the creases, the character lines, the transition between the polish and the satin finish of the case, very sharp. You'll also note that the bracelet nicely executed, essentially as it came out of Geneva, in my estimation is mid to late 1998, polished down the center, polished on its outer flanks, satin finished outer edges, light on the wrist. It is a very comfortable, older style Rolex bracelet, so it has a little bit of that characteristic Rolex rattle, but that's endearing for this era of Rolex Daytona. You buy this era of Daytona because you want a collectible and you want the experience. Plenty of channels between the links. Even then, Rolex knew how to make a bracelet that aerates the wrist and avoids pinching skin and pulling hair. Now, inside the clasp, you can see it's in outstanding condition. The stampings, and it was a stamped clasp back then, are crisp, deep, perfectly defined. You can see the reference number of the bracelet right below my finger right here. You can also see the year code, and it is stamped X. Back then, the bracelets as well as the watches had sequential serial numbers. You can see the external straight-through polish of the clasp in excellent condition. And I'll also mention that the one element that simply can't be covered up or bandaged in any way is the lacquer fill of the bezel. And here you can see this one's quite honest. Almost completely intact, the lacquer filling within the recesses of the hash marks and the numerals, as well as the wording units per hour. Wonderfully complete. You can even see that the pips beneath the speed ratings of the tachymeter scale are all intact all the way around. So the condition is very good. So let's talk a little bit about that dial, because I teased it and I want to clarify. The Patrizzi dial is not a color combination. It's not an automatic, okay, well I have black and I have silver registers, so that's a Patrizzi dial. The Patrizzi effect is a degradation of the varnish used on the sub-registers. So if your watch doesn't have that characteristic tinge of browned sub-registers, you don't have a Patrizzi dial. What a Patrizzi dial is degradation. It's a sign that something, UV radiation, moisture intrusion, bad watchmaking, has essentially transformed that Zapron varnish on the sub-registers. Some people like it, some people don't, but I happen to think that the best watch you can buy on the pre-owned circuit, especially when you're talking about something like this that's borderline vintage and over 20 years old, the best watch you can buy is the one that is as close to the factory as possible, and this watch is that. Otherwise, you can see it's a late edition of the Zenith-powered Daytona dial, so you have the 3 hash marks in between each of the stations of the minutes on the chronograph minutes. So in other words, you have effectively 0, 1, 2, 3, and that's 5, 1, 2, 3, and that's 10, 1, 2, 3, and so on. Then you also have the upright 6. So you have a 6 that doesn't look like a 9. In the initial variants of these dials, the 6 was upside down. It was radially arrayed, so it wound up looking like a 9. Also, this watch does not feature tritium. The midpoint of 1998 was the transition point when the watches went from tritium to super luminova, and you can see this is a luminova dial. It is not signed T. Finally, you do have Rolex and then 4 lines under that, as well as the 400 unit bezel that was swapped out from the original 200 almost immediately after production of this generation began in 1988. So you have the final and beautifully preserved iteration of the Daytona as powered by Zenith. Now, what's inside the case? Well, it's what Rolex calls a caliber 40-30, so 31 joules, beaten away at a Rolex like 28,800 vibrations per hour, but it's built on the bones of Zenith's El Primero. And this was the MO at Rolex from 1988 to 1999. Rolex spent the time saving its bullets, studying, learning, and planning what eventually became the in-house caliber 4130. But the Zenith El Primero, as featured in the 16520, is a different beast than what we've commonly come to associate with Zenith proper. So it does have a lower beat rate, 4 Hertz rather than 5. This was done for a number of reasons, to reduce long-term wear, but also to permit servicing with conventional lubricants on the escapement. Rolex did COSC certify the watch, so it is a chronometer, in spite of the fact that most El Primero calibers are not. It doesn't feature hacking seconds, but that's germane to the type. No El Primero does, save the new Dayfi El Primero 21. It does feature a column wheel, and I'll note that the actuation action of the chronograph on this watch is distinctly more mechanical, and you can hear it and you can feel it more sharply than you can on the caliber 4130, which is a little bit creamier in its action. It does feature additional modifications versus the original Zenith caliber 400. So you have the addition of a Breguet overcoil hairspring for resistance to gravitationally induced timing deviation, the addition of a free-sprung architecture for the balance, so it's tougher, it's more shock resistant, uses Rolex's micro-Stella variable inertia adjustment nuts, and there was also considerable revision in addition to the removal of the date. You can see the watch has no date. There was considerable revision to the winding system, which Rolex replaced with its own Perpetual system to make the assembly far more robust and less maintenance intensive. So there were meaningful changes executed in Rolex's take on the El Primero. It's not simply a cased-up customer caliber. Moreover, these El Primeros were built in a special room at Zenith, specifically for the Rolex project. So this is essentially a Grail watch. It's rare that a Grail watch is fairly simple with one complication or fewer. Stainless steel, in almost every respect, plain, classical, understated. This watch is all of those things. It's also timeless, as there's very little to tell other than the metal bezel between a contemporary 2018 Rolex Daytona and this watch built exactly 20 years prior. You can see and you can purchase this A-Series Rolex Cosmograph Daytona Zenith powered on our website. Super Luminova, not tritium. This is our A-Series Zenith-powered Rolex Daytona. Beautifully luminescent, also the first generation of the Daytona, water-resistant to 100 meters, an all-around sports chronograph. See it and own it on our website.